was Halloween night, a cold Saturday with heavy clouds, and the weather report warned that rain would come soon. That year, the holiday fell on a weekend, and my mom wanted everything to be perfect. She always treated Halloween like a competition with the neighbors. Our house had to be the most decorated, the most inviting for kids who went door to door. She made candy bags by hand, filled them with all kinds of sweets, and prepared the front yard as if it were a stage. But the children of the neighborhood were not showing up. As the afternoon passed, my mom grew frustrated. She decided it was because we didn't have enough decorations. She sent me to the attic to bring down more, even though I told her it was unnecessary. The attic was located directly above my bedroom. I pulled down the wooden ladder and climbed up. Everything was in order, boxes stacked neatly, holiday containers, arranged by season. I found the remaining Halloween bin and pushed it toward the opening. For a moment, I paused. I felt like I wasn't alone up there. The shadows of the storage containers stretched into the far corner, and I thought I noticed something move. But it was probably just my imagination. I told myself it was nothing, climbed down, and carried the decorations outside with my mom. The weather soon turned against us. The rain began earlier than expected, and the number of trick-or-treaters dropped even more. My mom was visibly upset, her baskets of candy bags untouched, her decorations wasted. I didn't care much. I went back to my room, closed the door, and played games on my laptop. By evening, the thunderstorm had arrived, making the house feel even more isolated. Later that night, while still at my desk, I noticed something unusual. It wasn't the storm. It was the ceiling above me. I thought I heard movement in the attic, slow and deliberate, like someone shifting their weight. I sat there, frozen. It could have been the wind or the house settling, but a feeling of unease started to spread through me. I stepped into the hallway. The attic entrance was visible above the stairs, and to my shock, the wooden door that sealed it was not closed properly. It was hanging slightly open. Before I could process what that meant, another sound reached me. This time it came from downstairs. It was the sound of the refrigerator door. Someone was in the kitchen, moving things around. I wanted to believe it was my mom, but the hour was late, and she had gone to bed earlier. Something was wrong. I walked quietly to my parents' room and opened the door. Both of them were sound, asleep. The fear hit me all at once. If they were in bed, then who was moving around the kitchen? I shook my dad awake. I whispered, telling him someone was in the house, and that I thought they were hiding in the attic. He immediately sat up, wide-eyed, and grabbed the police baton he kept under the bed. He peeked out into the hallway. When he returned, his voice was sharp and low. He told me he had seen a figure moving toward the attic and climbing back inside. We locked the bedroom door and called the police. My mom was now awake too, frightened but silent. We stayed huddled together, waiting for the sound of sirens. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the flashing lights of the police car appeared outside. Officers entered our home and went directly to the attic. They pulled down the ladder, climbed up, and searched. When they returned, they weren't alone. They had found a man. He was dirty, with unkempt hair and ragged clothes. He looked like someone who had been living on the streets. He admitted openly that he had entered our house the day before. He said the front door had been unlocked, and he needed a place to sleep. In the attic, the officers discovered one of our blankets spread out on the floor. Next to it was an empty jar of peanut butter, taken from our kitchen. He had been living directly above my bedroom, waiting for chances to come down at night. The police described him as cooperative. He did not resist. He said he meant no harm, only that he was cold and hungry. But the thought that he had been in our home without us knowing, just a few feet above our heads, was deeply disturbing. Every sound I had heard in the attic had been real. He had been there the whole time. We did not press charges. The police escorted him out of the house, and that was the end of it. But for me, It has never truly ended. To this day, whenever I hear a noise above my room at night, I remember that Halloween. I think about how vulnerable we really were, and I realize that the most terrifying intruder is not a ghost, not a shadow, not a story you tell on Halloween. It is a real person, quietly hiding in the place you thought was safest. It was a Thursday night in late October. I was at home, preparing a simple dinner for myself. The house was quiet, except for the sound of food sizzling in the pan. My phone buzzed on the counter, and when I checked it, I saw a text from a close friend. She asked if she could come over later that night. She sounded upset, said she needed company. Of course, I agreed immediately. We had known each other for years, and if she needed comfort, I was glad to offer it. I cleaned up the kitchen, set the table, and waited. Hours passed, but she never arrived. I assumed something had come up, or maybe she had fallen asleep at home. I sent her a message, but there was no reply. By midnight, I was tired. I turned off the lights, locked the doors, and went to bed. The storm outside rattled the windows, and the neighborhood was silent. I closed my eyes, trying to ignore the strange feeling of unease that lingered in the room. At some point during the night, I woke up, not from a noise, but from the sense that something was wrong. I opened my eyes, and in the dim glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains, I saw a shape standing in the corner of my bedroom. It was a person, or at least, it looked like one, but the body was disturbingly thin, almost skeletal. The face was hidden in shadow, yet I could see the pale outline of sharp cheekbones and hollow eyes. My heart pounded as I struggled to convince myself I was dreaming. But I was awake, fully awake, and the figure was not disappearing. It stood, perfectly still, watching me. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, I pulled the blanket up to my chest and whispered, "Who's there?" The figure did not answer. It only tilted its head slightly, as if curious. After what felt like an eternity, exhaustion must have overtaken me. I blinked, and suddenly, the corner was empty again. I told myself it had been sleep paralysis or a trick of the shadows. Eventually, I drifted back into a restless sleep. The next morning, sunlight filled the room, making everything seem normal again. I tried to laugh at myself, but when I checked my phone, there was a new message from my friend. It said, "I never texted you last night. My phone died. I went to bed early." I froze, reading it again and again. If she hadn't messaged me, then who had sent that text asking to come over? Unease crept back into my chest. I went to the kitchen to make coffee, trying to shake the thought away. But when I walked past the hallway mirror, I noticed something strange. The surface of the glass was smudged, as if someone had pressed their hand against it. The print was long, bony, with fingers stretched unnaturally wide. It did not look like my hand. I wiped it clean, telling myself it must have been there before. Still, I could not escape the feeling of being watched. That night, I triple-checked the locks before going to bed. I even placed a chair against my bedroom door, just in case. But when I woke again in the early hours of the morning, the chair had been moved. It was now standing neatly against the wall, as if someone had placed it there intentionally, and in the same corner of the room, the figure had returned, tall, thin, unmoving. I could not deny it anymore. This was not a dream. This was not my imagination. Someone or something had entered my home. I forced myself to sit up and reach for the lamp. But before my fingers touched the switch, the figure stepped closer. It was slow, deliberate, each movement exaggerated, as though its joints were stiff. The light finally flickered on, and the corner was empty again. But the blanket I had pulled up earlier was no longer covering me. It was folded neatly at the foot of my bed, as though someone had been standing there and carefully arranged it. That was the last night I stayed in that house. The very next day, I packed a bag and left for my sister's place across town. I didn't explain everything to her. I only said that I felt unsafe. A week later, when I finally returned to collect the rest of my belongings, I found something waiting for me. In the kitchen, on the counter where my phone had first buzzed that night, there was a note written on yellowed paper. The handwriting was thin and spidery, barely legible. It said, "Thank you for letting me in." I checked every lock, every window. Nothing had been broken. The police searched but found no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no trace of anyone else living there. But I knew what I had seen. I knew what had stood in the corner of my room, watching me while I slept, and I knew that it had never needed to break in. It had been invited through a message that wasn't from my friend. I never stayed in that house again. To this day, when I receive a late-night text asking to come over, I hesitate, because I will always wonder if it is really from someone I know, or if it is from the skeletal guest who still waits for another invitation. Moving into a new home is supposed to be exciting. Fresh paint, empty rooms waiting to be filled with memories, and the feeling that you finally have a space of your own. When I first got the keys to my house, I felt nothing but relief. It wasn't large, but it was mine, and after years of saving, I was proud to call it home. The neighborhood was quiet, filled with older families who kept to themselves. The house itself was modest: 2 bedrooms, a living room, a small kitchen, and an attic I barely used. For weeks, life was peaceful. I unpacked slowly, arranged furniture, and started to feel comfortable. But then the visits began. One evening, while I was sitting in the living room, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, a man was standing on the porch. He looked to be in his 50s, his clothes worn, his hair gray and unkempt. At first, I thought he was a lost neighbor, but he smiled in a way that unsettled me and said, "You're living in my house." I forced a laugh, thinking it was a mistake. I explained politely that I had bought the property from the previous owner and even mentioned the realtor's name. The man shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "this house has always been mine, and I want it back." I closed the door and locked it, unsettled by the encounter. The next morning, I called the realtor, who assured me there had been no issues with the sale. They said the man was likely confused or unstable. I tried to believe that, but over the next several weeks, he kept returning. Sometimes during the day, sometimes late at night. Always the same words: "This is my house." I never let him in, but his persistence gnawed at me. Then one night, I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. My first thought was that I had left the door unlocked. I grabbed a flashlight and crept into the living room. The door was closed and bolted, but when I turned, the beam of light landed on him standing at the bottom of the stairs, staring at me. I froze. "How did you get in here?" I demanded, but he didn't answer. He only tilted his head, as if confused that I didn't understand. I reached for my phone, but by the time I looked up again, he was gone. No sound of footsteps, no door opening or closing. The house was silent. I hardly slept that night. The next day, I checked every lock, every window. Nothing was broken. There was no way he should have been inside. Days turned into weeks, and the visits grew stranger. Sometimes I would find objects moved in the house, chairs shifted, cabinets open, lights turned on. Sometimes I would wake up in bed and feel the weight of someone sitting at the edge of the mattress. But when I looked, the room was empty. One evening, I called a locksmith and had every lock in the house replaced. For a short time, I felt safe again, until the scratching started. It came from the attic, soft at first, like fingernails against wood. I told myself it was mice or squirrels, but deep down, I knew better. I could hear the rhythm of it, deliberate, almost like someone tracing words into the beams above my head. I avoided the attic for as long as I could, until one night the scratching grew so loud I couldn't sleep. With shaking hands, I pulled down the ladder and climbed up. The air was stale and heavy. I swept the flashlight across the space and nearly dropped it. On the wooden floor, written in dust, were the words, "Welcome home." My breath caught in my throat. Someone had been living up there. I searched frantically, but the attic was empty. The next morning, I contacted the police. They searched the property, but found nothing. No sign of forced entry, no evidence of anyone else living there. They told me it was probably a prank, maybe from a neighborhood kid, but I knew the truth. This wasn't a prank. The man who claimed the house was his. He had found a way inside. That night, I decided to stay at a friend's place, but before I left, I checked the house one last time. Every window locked, every door secured, and yet, as I was walking out, I noticed something on the kitchen table. It was a folded piece of paper, one I had never seen before. With trembling hands, I opened it. The note said, "Thank you for keeping my house warm. I'll be here when you come back." I dropped it instantly and ran out the door. I didn't stop driving until I reached my friend's house across town. When I finally explained, she urged me to move out immediately. I never slept in that house again. I put it up for sale within the month, taking a loss just to get rid of it. The realtor never asked questions, and I never gave explanations. To this day, I wonder about the man. Was he a squatter, somehow living in the walls, slipping in and out when I wasn't looking? Or was he something else entirely, tied to the house in a way I'll never understand? All I know is that when someone says, "This is my house," you should believe them. Because sometimes, you're not the real owner at all.